All right, so today we're diving into something that's probably like sitting in your kitchen right now. We're talking about figs. They seem pretty simple, right? Just a regular fruit,
Yeah.
but there's actually a whole lot more to them than meets the eye.
Oh, absolutely. The common fig has a really interesting history, a lot of it that people just don't know.
Yeah, and to dive into all this, we're using, believe it or not, Wikipedia.
That's right, Wikipedia.
Yeah.
Their page on figs is surprisingly thorough.
Super detailed. And you know, one of the first things that really jumped out at me, figs dot aren't actually fruits.
It's true,
Yeah.
yeah. A fig is actually this structure called a syconium. Imagine like a tiny container, and inside are all these tiny, tiny
Get
flowers.
out of here.
Seriously. And when we eat a fig, we're actually eating all those flowers all ripened up. Pretty crazy, huh?
That is wild. And you know what else is wild? That milky sap that you get on your hands when you're like picking figs. I
Hmm.
just thought it was sap, but
Yeah.
turns out that stuff can irritate your skin.
Yeah, it's a mild irritant.
Why would a plant like do that?
It's all part of the fig's defenses, you know? Helps keep animals from eating the figs before the seeds are ready.
That's pretty clever.
It's a built-in defense mechanism. And it's not just figs, by the way. Other plants in the same family do this too, like mulberries.
Oh, yeah.
Ever gotten those sticky fingers from picking mulberries? Same idea.
Okay, so it's like a family trait.
Exactly.
Okay, but let's rewind a bit. Let's talk about the fig's history. Because I was reading that figs have been around for ages, like way longer than most of the fruits and veggies we usually eat.
Oh, for sure. Figs are one of the very first crops that humans ever cultivated, you know. There's evidence of people eating figs going all the way back to 9400 BC.
Oh.
Archaeologists actually found, like, fossilized figs. And these figs were from the Jordan Valley, which is just, wow, think about how long ago that was.
9400 BC. That means people were growing figs before they were growing, like wheat.
Way before.
That's incredible. Okay, so were the ancient Greeks into figs too?
Oh, yeah, definitely. Aristotle, you know, the philosopher, he was fascinated by figs. Like, he even wrote about how they're pollinated, which is this whole thing with tiny wasps. Now, he didn't have all the details exactly right, but still pretty impressive for back then. And speaking of ancient fig fans, we got to mention Cato the Elder.
Okay, Cato the Elder, who was he?
He was a Roman statesman. And let me tell you, this guy was obsessed with figs. He wrote all about them, how to grow them, different types of figs, even how Romans used them in their cooking.
Oh, interesting. So what, like fig recipes?
Pretty much. Did you know that they used figs to, get this, fatten geese?
Figs and geese. Okay, now that's not a pairing I would have ever thought of.
Right. They would make this delicacy, kind of a precursor to foie gras from the goose liver. It just goes to show how important figs were to the Romans. Like, they were even part of their fancy dishes.
Figs and foie gras. That's a history lesson right there.
It is.
Okay, so we've talked about how ancient civilizations loved figs, but how did they actually spread across the world? It's not like figs could just hop on a plane, right?
No, definitely not. It was a really slow process, mostly through trade and travel. So figs spread from the Mediterranean, where they were first cultivated, all throughout Europe and Asia. This took centuries, by the way. And then, when explorers started traveling to the New World, guess what they brought with them?
Figs.
Figs.
So is that how figs got to California?
Exactly. And there's a really interesting story there, too. So they brought over the specific type of fig called the mission fig, and it turned out that California's climate, perfect for growing mission figs, they just thrived there.
Wow, so when I'm enjoying some California figs, I'm actually like tasting a little bit of history.
Pretty much.
That's so cool. What about those stories of like Italian immigrants burying their fig trees for the winter? What kind of fig trees were they burying?
Oh, good question. So the mission fig, that came later. The fig that these communities really loved, especially in colder places, was the Cadota fig. And here's where it gets really wild. Pliny the Elder, who was a Roman naturalist, he actually described the Cadota fig in his writings.
Get out. So that tradition goes all the way back to ancient Rome.
It does.
That's amazing. Okay, so we've talked about the fig's big world tour, but now I got to ask about something that kind of freaks me out.
Yeah.
Fig wasps. How does that whole thing even work?
I know, right? Fig wasps. It's a little strange when you first hear about it, but it's actually this like amazing example of how nature works. Basically, figs and fig wasps, they need each other to survive.
Okay.
Yeah. So the fig gives the wasp larvae a safe place to grow and food to eat, and in return, the wasps pollinate the fig flowers, so it's a win-win.
I guess so, for the figs and the wasps at least. But how does a wasp even get inside? Figs are basically like these little closed-off worlds.
Right, they're like little fortresses, but you see that tiny, tiny opening at the bottom of the fig?
Yeah.
That's called the ostiole, and it's the only way in or out.
That tiny thing. No way a wasp can squeeze through there.
Oh, but they do, and it's quite a process. The female fig wasp, she squeezes through that tiny opening, and it's a tight squeeze, let me tell you.
I bet.
Yeah, she often loses her wings and antenna trying to get in.
Are you serious? Talk about dedication.
Right, but anyway, once she's inside, she lays her eggs, and, well, her job is done.
So those crunchy bits in figs, those aren't wasp parts.
No, 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 you're safe. Those are just seeds.
Okay, good.
So the male wasps hatch first. They fertilize the females, and then they chew a tunnel out of the fig. Then the females, who are now carrying pollen, they emerge and fly off to find another fig and start the whole cycle over again.
Wow. Okay, that is both incredible and kind of gross.
I know, right? Nature is wild. Here's the important part. When we're eating a ripe fig, those wasps are long gone. And actually, the fig breaks down the wasp bodies completely.
Okay, that's good to know. I'm all for teamwork in nature, but I'm happy we're not biting into wasps when we eat a fig.
Right.
So all that's left are those crunchy seeds and all that delicious figgy flavor. Speaking of delicious, let's do some fig fun facts. What do you have for me?
All right, fun facts. Did you know that figs, they're actually really good for you? They have tons of fiber, potassium, even calcium.
No way.
Really?
I just thought they were like a tasty treat.
Oh, they're packed with nutrients.
Okay, wow, figs are like a health food now.
And dried figs. Even more concentrated.
Okay, now I'm looking at fig Newtons in a whole new light.
Well, let's not get ahead of ourselves. Processed figs are still processed, but fun fact nonetheless.
Totally, totally.
Yeah.
Okay, so figs are healthy, but they're also like culturally significant. Right?
Yeah.
I mean, they've been around forever, so they must have picked up some stories along the way.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Figs have this long history in mythology and religion. They've been seen as a symbol of peace and prosperity in a bunch of different cultures. Have you ever heard the phrase, each man under his own vine and fig tree?
Yeah, I think so. It rings a bell. Is that from the Bible?
Yeah. And it basically refers to, like, a time of abundance and tranquility. But figs pop up in other religious traditions, too, you know. You mentioned the ancient Greeks earlier. Well, get this, the Bodhi tree, the one where Buddha reached enlightenment, it's a type of fig tree.
You're kidding me. I had no idea there was a fig enlightenment connection. That's amazing.
It really is. Oh, and we can't forget about Babylonian mythology. They have this goddess Ishtar, and she's often shown with a fig tree, which represents things like fertility and protection. And then, of course, there's that famous story of Adam and Eve.
Oh, right. The fig leaves. I guess you could say that was a pretty strategic use of nature's bounty, right?
Definitely a memorable moment, especially in art history. But yeah, it all goes to show figs have been a part of our collective imagination for a very long time.
That's amazing when you really think about it. This little, well, not technically a fruit,
Right, right.
but you know what I mean. This fig has had such a huge impact on our history and culture. Who knew there was so much to learn about them? It really makes you think, huh, I mean, this little fig has been around for, like, what, thousands of years?
It's incredible, right? We're talking ancient civilizations, religious texts, even art inspired by figs.
It really makes you wonder what other secrets are just hidden in plain sight.
Oh, absolutely. That's what makes these deep dives so interesting, you know? We take these things for granted, like a fig on a cheese plate, but we never really think about the journey they took to get here.
And it's not just the history, right? Learning how figs actually work, like the whole not really a fruit thing, the wasps,
Yeah.
that really blew my mind.
It's amazing how nature works, isn't it? The fig is such a great example of that. These crazy connections, these relationships, we're just beginning to understand.
Fiercely. So I think safe to say the next time I see a fig, I'm going to look at it a little differently.
Me too.
I'll be thinking about ancient Rome, fig wasps, you name it. Who knew something so small could have such a huge story?
And that's the beauty of it, right?
Yeah.
Knowledge has this way of taking something ordinary and making it extraordinary.
So true. Well, on that note, listeners, we'll leave you with this. Next time you enjoy a fig, remember, it's not just a fruit. It's a journey through time, a symbol of cultures, and a pretty amazing example of just how wild nature can be.